When I was 10 years old, I knew I was going to be a writer, and for several reasons. But the most important reason was that I felt called to do it. I felt that I didn't then know what the Holy Spirit was about, but now I can look back and say, the Holy Spirit spoke to my heart and said, "You're going to be a writer." I remember looking into a mirror, and the mirror is in the Mitford Museum. That's a very important mirror. I was 10 years old looking into that mirror and saying, I'm going to be a writer. I actually said I'm going to be an author because the word author was so distinguished to me. I had played the card game author with my sister for years. And there were all those lovely people being authors, you know, the frilled shirts and all of that. So I wanted to be like them. So yes, I was called. And later on in advertising, many years later, when I actually thought I had something to say, I was called to leave advertising, take the risk, jump off the cliff, and go write my first novel. So yes, it's been a calling all along. I was in first grade, and the Mitford Museum, actually, the first gallery in the Mitford Museum is my first grade classroom, which is kind of, you know, sort of, you can tear up over that, I mean, because who would have dreamed that this little knobby-kneed country kid would end up with a museum in this little town in the foothills of North Carolina? In any case, I love to draw. Drawing was my first love, definitely. Love to read too, but drawing, that was the sexiest part of my life, was to draw. And I drew in my school books, and I drew while the teacher was talking and was often scorned for it. But anyway, Nan Downs came by my desk, and I remember exactly where I was seated, and I'd been drawing Jack and Jill. And she said, "Why, Janice Wilson, isn't that something? Let me take that up the hall and show it to the teachers." Well, I was just dazzled. Nobody had ever said anything like that to me. Nobody had ever looked at my art and thought it was worth showing up the hall. So Nan Downs, who loved her students, she taught us, yes, but she taught us with love, and that's what made it stick. I have to give Nan Downs great credit for everything that's happened to me. Well, I had been in despair earlier because I had tried to write a novel about a woman moving to the mountains of North Carolina and opening an inn. I thought that by opening an inn, we would get to see a parade of characters. I like a lot of characters in a novel. I must be Russian. I want a lot of people in a lot of relationships in anything I write because I want to enjoy living there for the 2 years it takes typically to write a book. In any case, I'd tried writing a novel and it didn't work, and so I was lying in bed one night. It was actually 2 o'clock in the morning, I remember it distinctly, and I had this idea of a priest walking down a village street, and that's all I had. It was a scrap, just a scrap. And I just got up and went to my computer, this is in Blowing Rock, and started writing about this person that I didn't know, had no name for, nothing. And as I wrote, I just got to know him. I gave him, he didn't even have a last name. I knew it was Father Tim. I could tell because in the sort of vision I had, he was wearing a collar. So named him Father Tim, but it was weeks later that I found a last name for him. I thought, this guy's got to have a last name. And he's Irish. Okay, so I got down on my knees several times for different reasons, but this time with this huge map of Irish names. And I would dispose of that one, and that one wouldn't work, and this one didn't sound right, and that one didn't fit, and then I came to Kavanaugh. And it was perfect, and I just knew. So the whole thing built. I mean, the author did not sit down with an outline. Jerry Burns, now deceased, who was the editor of the Blowing Rocket, that was the newspaper in Blowing Rock. I asked him to read what I had. It was a couple of chapters. I didn't know what I had. And he said, I said, what do you think about it? He said, well, actually, I don't know what to think about it. But let's run it in the newspaper and see what others think about it. So he did, and they liked it. And he said, you know, I think we've got something here. Why don't you give me a column a week? Well, now, this is a small town southern newspaper, and there was nothing happening in Blowing Rock, you know what I'm saying? I mean, the occasional car accident or fender bender, but it was it. He was thrilled to have that much ink every week. And so it started, according to him, the subscription thing, the circulation number mounted. People in Florida, you know, a lot of Florida people like Blowing Rock, they started saying, oh, we want 2 or 3 of those subscriptions, send them to our cousins or whatever. So it was sort of what Mr. Dickens had done. People would queue up and wait for when the cereal hit the newsstand, queue up and wait to give their pence or whatever it cost and go home and read it in the evening to his wife and family. The father was out in the business world bringing these things home. I sat down knowing nothing about where this was going and just prayed a lot and tried to follow my heart. I want my readers to be happy. I want them to cry too, because that's important. It's an important release that we need and often don't allow ourselves. Mostly I want them to laugh. So I tried to give them those 2 gifts. Okay, so come in, relax, get a deep breath. You're going to be safe in this book. You're not going to be mangled or nobody's going to, you know, I mean, it's a safe place. And here you can laugh and cry. And so that's my intention, is to serve the reader's heart and soul. I wanted to give my readers a place of refuge, a place where they could sort of get a deep breath and let the story unfold. So, did I answer your question? I really think that there are things in our lives that we must simply ride out. Discouragement, sometimes we just need to ride it out. Depression, ride it out. We're always trying to cover up and mask, and just there are things that the hard things need to be ridden out, and the good things need to be ridden out. Not always. But I can't say that I have been able to avoid any of those things. I've been discouraged. I mean, I would have been so discouraged when I was writing my first novel at home in Mitford that I would have probably abandoned the whole thing 2 or 3 times. But I had a gentlewoman's agreement with the editor. I had an intentional agreement to give him a column a week. And that's really what wrote the novel, was that intentional accountability that I had with him. Well, I took a risk. You know, you might ask yourself, who would want to read these books? They're so clean. I mean, somebody said to me, you don't write about sex, you don't write about this. What do you write about? It's like, there's plenty to write about. Plenty to write about. So I go in honoring the reader. I'm a reader. I want to be honored when I read a book. And I want to feel safe. And I want to be entertained. And I want to be made to think. I want some, marrow in a book. I expect a lot of a book, and I want people to expect something of mine. Because I honor the reader, we have to deal with deep things. You know, I know they're able and capable of depth, And we want that depth to be plumbed by a book, I think. That's one of the things I think we need from a really good read. And also, I'm processing my own life. You know, people who say, I would love to be your best friend. I would just love to come have dinner with you, or just, live next door. And I'm saying, the best way to know me, if that's what you really want, is just read my work. It's the author. You can't help it. You cannot hide as an author. You're all over your work. So I was going through and processing many of the things that I let Father Tim go through. I'm always thinking I haven't got it right, and that I'm not going to get it right, and that I can't get it right, which was his issue in the cave. And Cynthia reminded him, that's God's job. Leave God's job alone. So sometimes I turn to my own work just to remind me that it's not about me making all these decisions. My life is so jealous of my writing life that it is constantly trying to distract me and make me walk away. I can just get distracted by a squirrel on a tree limb or something. There's always that tension. That tension is really hard because I have a really, really full life. It all depends upon the ferocity of the heart and upon letting God have his way with us. That's the hard part, letting God have his way with us. Well, I guess the most surprising was the fact that it was successful. Success just sort of tears the top of your head off. It's hard to, having never done it before, then you have to navigate it. And that's when you really need to be on your knees. Because to navigate something that involves so many people, that's a very tender thing. That's a very important thing. So I think that's been the hardest part of my writing life was having the success that I never dreamed I could possibly have. Well, I guess it is my readers. My readers are so devoted. We have had all 50 states come to the Mitford Museum. All 50 states. One of our big fans lives in Paris. Before she had a terrible stroke, she was an important and a very distinguished librarian in a Paris library. She would have been here for the opening, but Paris was locked down France was locked down at the time. We had a woman get on a plane in Scotland and come here for the opening of the museum. So, my readers are terribly important to me. That is that's a heavy weight to have to assume that I might even know what to say to that question. Honestly, I have no idea. A heavy weight. I carry a heavy weight often, not always. Some of that has to be ridden out. It's what's happening in our society. We can do the best we can, but I guess if I just had to give you a flip answer, I would just say turn off the TV. Turn off the DAM TV. Don't watch the news. Don't get upset and angry. Just do something better than that. Do something higher than that. And the best thing we can do probably is just take care of ourselves and not be sullen and sulky and angry and discouraged. Just go write a chapter and get it over with. I have an answer for that, actually. That's a good one. Get out there. Get out there. People want to see the author. If you get out there and only 3 people show up, engage with those 3 people like it's the only 3 people you're ever going to have in your life. That's how I did it. That's how I started out. I started out with 3 people. I've been to a book event and nobody came. This was fairly early on, of course. And that's disheartening. But I just had a good time with the staff, the bookstore staff. You've just got to use what God gives you. So if God gives you good health and any kind of pride in your work, then get out there and share it. If somebody asks you to go on tour or make a speech, just do it. Don't even think twice. Just do it. You ask such great questions. But what would I say to her? That is so hard. I was such an anxious child. I was so eager to please my teachers. I have to say that a lot of the students hated my guts because I did please the teachers. I was there to learn. I came every morning starved for learning. That was my favorite thing. It still is. Well, teachers love that because that's what they're in the world to do, is teach. I remember Nan Downs asking me to dust the erasers. That was a great honor. Have you ever dusted the erasers? I mean, there's something about that. But what would I say to that little girl? I would just give her a big hug, and I would say to her what someone used to say to me. Everything gonna be all right. And it is. Well, I think one way is to make people laugh, which opens up the heart for that message, for the faith message. And I think, too, that I just wanted to share my faith. I wanted to share it. In fact, if you have a strong faith, I don't see how you can help but share it. It's like a cup that runs over. And I don't always have a full cup. But I do often pray what Father Tim prayed as he approached his office every morning. Lord, make me a blessing to someone today. And it sounds like an ego thing that I could be a blessing to someone, but it's not me who's being a blessing. It would be God working through me to deliver a blessing to somebody. That's a great joy, to deliver a blessing to somebody. And when we see faith as angry and mean, and I grew up on this. I grew up on the pointed finger. That's helpful. It really doesn't work. I think it's not the pointed finger, it's the love. You send out the love, and that's how they believe the faith might actually be true. What a shame that I can't be there to greet these people, many of whom will have read my work. I really appreciate all those people who are going to be in the audience this evening and truly regret not being able to be there and say, get out there and give them everything you've got.